all mine. I wonder if she ever tells him of me.
Up with the jolly old lark, sun hardly peeping over the horizon. Not your usual habit, I hasten to add, but today you've a mystery to solve.
I hate it that you seem to be able to get...
Last night you arrived at St. Bride's, a holiday centre in Ireland where you experience old-fashioned storybook schoolgirl life.
Shoulders back, chin down.
So what's worrying you? Just this. It's all too real. You want to find out what's going on, while you still can. I stumbled across this story completely by accident. Scouring some old reviews on the Spectrum Computing website, I came across a publishing house simply titled St. Bride's School, brackets, Ireland. My initial thoughts were, well, this could be an interesting sojourn. Presumably these games were made by the pupils themselves. I wonder if they're hilariously rubbish and I can have a good old laugh about them. Well, I was right about the interesting part.
We say, it's very critical of course, but we say that our society as it is today puts a premium on mediocrity and niceness and, you know, being sweet and being polite, whereas we put a premium on being stroppy and being aggressive, but not in a way that kind of, aggressive in a good way, aggressive like an animal's aggressive if it feels it, or like a kid is if it feels it.
Before our story of St. Bride's even begins, a curious tale of screaming hippies sets the scene. The Atlantis Commune was established in Burtonport, County Donegal in 1974 by an Englishwoman by the name of Jenny James. Housing up to 30 people at a time, they were often referred to by locals as the Screamers due to their incessant, well, screaming.
I just want to say to you, I just want to say to you with some kind of comeback, I think you're a bitch, and I think you're a and I think you're horrible to treat me the way you're treating me. I don't know what to do. I just hate you for the way that you're treating me. I just hate it.
Screaming, or as the Atlantis Commune would put it, primal therapy, it was the act of re-experiencing past trauma by standing in a garden and shrieking at the top of your voice. Pretty sure this is basically just a middle-class version of Falling Down with Michael Douglas, but anyway, this goes some way to explain why the residents of County Donegal weren't particularly happy with the Atlantis Commune setting up shop in their fishing village. Burtonport is more about giant lobsters on the side of restaurants weird, not, rampant child abuse weird. After splitting in 1982, the group reformed in Colombia, expanding the commune up to around 60 people at their height, and then some murders happened, because that's what always happens with cults, and that was the end of that. But it wasn't the end for Atlantis House, because this is where the tale of St. Bride's takes a foothold. With the Atlantis Commune gone, it was time for a new, quieter cult to move in.
All of them are strangers. They came to Burtonport in West Donegal 2 months ago. New faces with faith in ancient traditions. Their last base was in a smallish Yorkshire town, but it's here, next door to the raw Atlantic, they plan to establish their village. It's to be a sanctuary from the modern world. All but one of this advanced party are female. They reject the term woman. Instead they use maid. Man is an acceptable phrase, but the role he has played in most civilizations over hundreds of years has no place in this community. It's spurned as heresy.
A new religious movement is always a good thing that definitely doesn't result in people drinking poison, but thankfully the Silver Sisterhood never ascended to being dead, so I guess we've got to give them a plus point for that. Moving from Yorkshire to Donegal in 1982, headed by an English writer by the name of Miss Martindale, who will become our important figurehead in all of this, the Sisterhood rechristened Atlantis House to which in English translated to the Bridge of Life. This was a matriarchal society in which the sisterhood believed that God was a woman. They believed that the patriarchy was a temporary and unnatural societal structure, and that the matriarchy would soon enter a golden age. It was, however, an equal opportunities religion. Men could also join the commune, and in fact, one man did. And then he left again less than a year later. I think there's quite a few easy jokes I could make here, but for fear of turning into Bernard Manning, I'll leave those with you. Please don't fill up the comment section with, I'm surprised he lasted a bloody year with a bunch of women. We get it, the subtext's already there. It is pretty funny though. To truly get a sense of what was going on here, however, let's take a look at volume 10, issue 39 of Woman Spirit magazine? I think it was a magazine. It doesn't sound as entertaining as Mean Machines magazine, but hey ho. I had made arrangements to arrive at the Silver Sisterhood in Burton Port by nightfall today. As I ride north up to the Donegal coast towards this matriarchal community, the sun is setting and I arrive just in time. The large house is located in a small village within sight of the Atlantic. I knock on the door and am greeted by a woman who leads me into a large parlour that has been turned into a tea shop, filled with lovely furniture and crafts. There is no one else in the room, and she seats me by front window table. There is only a little light coming around the window. Another woman comes in, curtsies to the first, and speaks in a dialect of Old English I cannot follow. Both women leave for a moment, and the first returns with a large oil lamp. She introduces herself as Maestre Bragg, Old English Bridget, and explains to me that this community of maids is run hierarchically with herself as head, reflecting the will of the goddess. Maids, upon entering and leaving her presence, curtsy. All maids wear dresses and heads are covered at all times. Maids gather 3 times a day for meals. The maestra advises me to perceive of myself as an anthropologist, coming to look at another culture and cooperating with habit and custom as a matter of respect. I tell myself that time will tell whether I am a participating observer or an observing participant. Beneath that wariness, I am thrilled to be visiting this community and look forward to comparing my experiences on U.S. women's land to what is happening here. Okay, well, I got the voice wrong. So far, well, not normal, but it just all comes across as a kooky new age nonsense that largely caters to women. It's fine. What really drew my attention, though, was this paragraph. As my 4-day visit went on, I enjoyed praying, wearing skirts among women, living in a structured household with a low technological level, and dissolving somewhat the accumulated patriarchal grime in my brain cells. There is no electricity, plastic is never used, and considered to pollute whatever environment it is in. No electricity, no plastics. This would pollute whatever environment they sat in, apparently. Remember that, will you? Note it down in your workbooks now. The article goes on to explain more details about the way of life that was adhered to under the leadership of the Sister Silverhood, and a reader's letter summarises this further. Dear Woman Spirit, I noticed in your fall issue, number 37, an article by Janet McCrickard about Madrians. Tucked into all the talk on religious doctrine was a brief reference to the Wrens. I stayed with these women, and I assure you that the Silver Sisterhood are much more exciting than that article would lead you to expect. If you visited there after reading only that article, you might expect to go to a Sunday school tea run by nuns. The truth for me was that I felt high from the moment I walked in there, seeing women walking through the house in long dresses, radiating a real sense of power, hearing the wild beat of drums, chanting and dancing till golden shivers ran through, singing stirring songs and drinking to the destruction of the patriarch. These women are proud of their world and their way of life, disdainful of modern ways. They are fiery and passionate. They are also graceful and courteous. They are tender and loving and have a great warmth and welcome for outsiders once you've accepted their ways. They know about the old ways before men ruled. I certainly came away convinced of an ancient tradition, and these women were speaking powerfully from it. A word of advice: go to learn or don't go. They are tough on those who defend the modern world they abhor. If you want blood and fire in your veins and tenderness in your heart, they're worth a visit. I'll certainly be going again. Can anyone else hear the soundtrack to The Wicker Man playing right now? It must be a coincidence. Anyway, you may be wondering at this point, how in the name of Mother Jesus does any of this have anything to do with gaming? Well, that's where St. Bride steps in.
Those ladies call themselves the Victorians. Let us meet 2 of them and see what they are about. Would you welcome, please, Miss Tyrrell and Miss Rayner?
The Silver Sisterhood began to morph from the inside out, adopting the Victorian era as their new norm, and it seems that the focus began to shift away from the religious aspects of the sisterhood altogether, and more towards, well, a kinky Victorian boarding school business. Women of post-school age are invited to pay cold, hard cash for the chance to experience an 1800s lifestyle, replete with a prospectus that contains such exciting highlights as Latin and grammar. There was also the added sauciness of corporal punishment because, sure, why not? Again, this all seems super normal. And here's where all of this nonsense begins to circle the drain of gaming, because clearly St. Bride's wasn't making a whole lot of cash to stay afloat, offering girls the chance to get smashed with a cane for not remembering their Latin, and requesting payment for that privilege probably isn't the greatest money spinner in the world, and so they began to sell costumes, they began to sell books, and they began to sell magazines. But they also began to develop and sell games. Now, before we get into those, you may well be asking yourself, how does a school or cult in which the people who live within it eschew modern technology begin writing games? Well, once again, that's a good question, and much like anything to do with St. Bride's or Miss Martindale or anyone involved with any of this, the answers are hazy at best. Crash magazine in 1986 went to visit the St. Bride's house and was provided with an answer, but not one that quite answers anything. This world of lessons, and the pupils do have to study the basics of maths and languages, may seem rather crazy, but some people get their jollies dressing in chainmail made from coat hangers and killing orcs with cardboard axes. Once you've sat in that slightly damp room listening to scratchy records playing on a wind-up gramophone under the stern gaze of Marianne Scarlett, you can understand how easy it is to get lost in the game. One who did just that is Priscilla Langridge. She committed the unthinkable sin of introducing a micro into this time warp. Marianne was at first rather taken aback by the anachronistic intrusion. My experience has always been looking back in time, but it didn't take long before she realised that unlike television, which she thinks is passive and mind-rotting, computers call for 100% concentration and commitment. They're not just playing with a joystick. So, about a year and a half ago, part of St. Bride's entered the modern world, though they've been known to do their computing by candlelight. Priscilla was a writer long before fate, or more probably an advertisement brought her to the west coast of Ireland. Hardly a computer expert at that stage, she looked upon the micro as another medium, like books or comics, to be exploited as a rich experience, rather like the school. In fact, the secret of St. Bride's, their first adventure, set in the corridors and dormitories of the house, then out onto the cliffs, came from a game that they would play as they took the pupils on rambles. A mystery would be created from a few bare facts found as they walked along the shore. Okay, but then let's look at a couple of paragraphs directly before this. This is probably not the sort of school that you go to though, because the young ladies of St. Bride's are past the age of compulsory education, from their 20s upwards, and they go there for a week at a time, maybe more, to wear a uniform, sleep in a dorm, to take lessons and obey the rules, all without the creature comforts of 1985. They spend 24 hours a day living in a different time, living a different life. We give people a different experience of living as themselves. Marianne's background is both teaching and humanistic psychology, and this is far more than a theme holiday hotel. As an experiment in human behaviour, it's fascinating. St. Bride's works because the pupils are never given the chance to do anything but live the imaginary 1920s/30s era. Select advertisements bring in each fresh intake of 8, who pay around £120 a week for the privilege of indulging in things that most of us are only too happy to escape. Marianne greets each new girl, and pretty soon one will be chosen who shows a desire to be leader, and she will become the prefect. But according to Marianne, most are only too glad to give up the responsibilities of their adult world, and are delighted at having an excuse not to be grown up. Remember this next time you laugh at somebody who tells you that your school days are the happiest days of your life. So, how do these two differing worlds work exactly? It's never explained, and it's never looked into any further by Crash at the time, which is a shame, because the idea of a Victorian-specific household suddenly deciding to make computer games because, to paraphrase, someone just rocked up with a Commodore and we just thought, go on then. That doesn't quite sit correctly, does it? Those two things don't gel, and the reasons provided don't make any sense. She even goes on to say she loves racing car games. What fresh madness is this? You may also note in this article that the names Marianne and Priscilla are completely new to this story, and that's largely due to the fact that different names were used constantly by the ladies who ran the group. It is as confusing for you as it is for me, so forgive me if I make mistakes here. The presiding factor into all of this weirdness is that Miss Martindale was, in fact, headmistress Marianne Scarlett, and the other woman who ran the show, noted here as Priscilla Langridge, was potentially a different woman every time. If you're baffled, well, that's certainly a natural response. I am as well. Also, I may have got those names completely the wrong way round, but I don't think it's pertinent. All you need to know is that they're definitely women, and they do have names. I just don't know which. Anyway, moving on. I'm only going to touch briefly on some of the games here. There's very little need to go much deeper than surface level because the games produced by St. Bride's fell into one of two categories. Text adventures and... one category. Now, I'm not a huge fan of text adventures in general, mostly because the vocabulary required to resolve certain puzzles has to be exact. The Secret of St. Bride's is no different in that respect. Using Gilsoft's Quill and Illustrator to reproduce the School of St. Bride's, one of the first things you'll find is that even something as simple as directions aren't quite where they should be. It could, for instance, tell you that there are some stairs in a particular direction, leading up and down. If you try and enter the direction of the stairs, however, it won't accept that input. You have to type up instead. And while it seems like a minor gripe, this is just a small example of the many issues that the game has in terms of leading you in the right direction. Graphics are slow to draw in, and you'll often have to request a redescribe in order to work out which directions are available, and this bizarrely also instigates the redrawing of the scene, which you absolutely will not want to see again, because they're largely boring. The game reviewed fairly well back in the day, and reviews were peppered with curiosity in regards to St. Bride's as a whole. The Secret of St. Bride's by St. Bride's School for Girls. Now, you're not going to believe this, but in a nice secluded little part of Southern Ireland there is a school, and no ordinary school either. At this school, grown women actually pay money to spend a week being treated like old-fashioned teenage schoolgirls, complete with bonnet, bow and frilly knickers. No, this is not the actual adventure, this is the software house. This school, or so I am told, actually exists, and it is their obviously slightly weird teachers that have produced The Secret of St. Bride's for the 48K Spectrum. But no one seems to question it any further than that. Crash Magazine gave the game a 6 out of 10 and spent most of the review discussing the fact you could apply for a certificate from St. Bride's if you completed the game and found the secret amulet hidden in the virtual school. Computer and Video Games magazine gave the most comprehensive review, noting the issues with the required lexicon as the main reason the game didn't excel in its field. The Secret of St. Bride's was released in 1985, the first of the school's output, and more games quickly followed even in the same year. The Snow Queen improves on some of the aspects of The Secret of St. Bride's with improved artwork and a better dictionary of words to pick from. The Dog Boy followed, which didn't seem to receive any formal reviews from magazines, but it is an improvement again in terms of speed and vocabulary. It's also centered on the bizarre tale of a mute dog boy who can understand animals, and you're tasked with stopping a princess from opening what is essentially Pandora's box. One of the things you start to notice in terms of themes within all of St. Bride's games is a strong female role, whether it be the protagonist or characters within the games themselves, and really that's the strongest takeaway from all of these text adventures. Or it would be if it wasn't for the fact St. Bride's created the first 18 rated game in the UK. CRL were the publishers this time round, having previously received 15 certificates for text adventures Dracula and Frankenstein. St. Bride's game Jack the Ripper was apparently so gory for its time, the BBFC had a proper shit fit and slapped an 18 on the box. W.H. Smiths refused to even stock the thing. The nation recoiled in horror. Or they, would have if the game actually featured that much gore. Jack the Ripper was almost entirely text-based, and the BBFC were flapping their arms about a couple of gory images. Bear in mind there were films more violent than this that received lower certifications. If Jack the Ripper had been a novel, no certification would have even been granted at all, but of course this was a new and spooky medium of interactive fiction, and the youth would definitely have had their minds warped by reading and typing every now and then. Whatever, it is what it is, and Jack the Ripper does hold a good level of writing if you can manage to get more than 2 screens in without being walloped over the head and murdered. All in all, St. Bride's managed to develop 8 text adventures in total across multiple formats, and then, just as strangely as they entered this world, they kind of left. From what I can understand of this weird and spiralling story, after the closure of St. Bride's, Miss Martindale moved around in the UK before leaving for the USA. She may now be going by the name of Mary Gilliman. She may have married the director of King Kong, John Gilliman. She may have put on a one-woman stage show for a single night in LA entitled From Crazy to Sane or Am I?, in which she shares the tools she used on her 30-year pharmaceutical-free journey from manic madness to health that helped her become calmly grounded in everyday reality while receiving spiritual training and insights from disembodied mystical and magical realms. But much like the games that St. Bride's produced, I find it almost impossible to navigate my way around this absolute labyrinth of confusing connections. There are multiple sources involved in gathering all of this information, not least an excellent article on flexiblehead.blog that was originally published in Retro Gamer magazine, something I regrettably missed at the time, because if this whole story amazes you as much as it did me, you'll want to look further into it. I'll link to the various sources I've come across in the description of the video, from video archives to articles. Go ahead and dig away if you want, but don't come crying to me when you find yourself 20 feet deep in a hole you just dug and you're still no clearer as to why you're there.